Hello, hello. How are you guys doing tonight? Welcome to the Boulder Ableton Live user group. My name is Zach Kerstetter. I'm an Ableton certified trainer as well as the organizer of the user group here. I've been doing this the last couple of years, and I'm assuming since you're here, you guys know a little bit about what we do. For those guys who are unfamiliar, we host just monthly free meetings where we all get together and just talk about music production with Ableton Live. And different aspects about it. So either I'll come up here and I'll present about a topic, or I'll bring in a guest presenter to come talk. And this month, I brought in a bunch of guest presenters. I brought in all the certified trainers in Colorado to kind of just have a Q&A session with you guys. We got a pretty small crew tonight, so we have plenty of time for all of your questions. So I hope you brought a lot of questions for us. Before we get started, though, a couple real quick announcements. Restrooms are over here if you want to go over there. And just a general announcement that the whole reason I really started this group was not just to kind of share knowledge and information, but also just to help build the local Ableton Live community. So usually the way I like to start off these meetings is have everybody kind of turn to the person sitting next to you and introduce yourself and say hi and learn a little bit about them. If you already know the person you're sitting next to, go find somebody that you've never met before, say hi, make some friends, and then we'll get started in a couple minutes. Sound good? Can you email me the link to it so I can post it real quick?
Yeah, this is YouTube.com/KMG.
Okay.
Maybe there might be if you click on the video itself, there might be a better link.
Okay.
Just that first one. It says live mixing Pro Tools. I don't know how to change that.
Okay. Yeah, cool. If we could change that, it'd be great. But
I'm trying to ask Alfred. He has access to
oh, there's Nick. Cool. All right, I'll post that to the user group page. Cool. I'll probably find somebody.
official.
Yeah, trying to make it professional.
You have your own bottle of water, Darren.
Maybe
We don't have to share tonight.
maybe we can be like a boy band.
A man band.
The world's first man band.
All right, so hopefully everybody here has made friends with their neighbor. Before we kind of open the floor to questions from all you guys, I want to kind of just ask you guys a question. Who are you, and what do you know about Ableton? What do you do for a living? Yeah, want to start with Seraphin?
How is everybody tonight? Great. Good to meet you. I'm Seraphin Sanchez. I'm one of the U.S. brand managers at Ableton. And I make all different kinds of music. In addition to playing the laptop, I play the saxophone and keyboards. And right now, I mostly make music with other musical projects. So people will hire me to play an instrument or help them write songs. And Ableton Live and Push are two of my the tools that I use for almost every single musical project. I grew up here in Colorado and studied music and played music with a lot of different bands and projects. I became an Ableton certified trainer several years ago, and that's how I got to know people at Ableton, which led me to what I do full-time and professionally now is work for Ableton. So it's definitely a treat to be here with all these other intelligent gentlemen. So thanks.
Hello, I'm Darren Kramer. I'm a certified trainer as well, and I live in Westminster and been using Ableton about 12 years now, and I'm been a full-time trombonist and composer my whole life, and so Ableton's kind of changed the way I do things. So I do electric trombone DJ, and then I have an educational website called DKO Lessons, where I spread the word about Ableton and jazz improvisation and composing and fun stuff like that. So yeah, real pleasure to be here, and excited to share any knowledge I have with all of you. So ask away.
My name is Lauren Bregitzer. I am an associate professor at the University of Colorado Denver, where I teach music production, electronic music, sound design. I've been there for about 15 years. I have a background in electronic music and music production, which I majored in college at Berklee College of Music so many years ago. And so I've done mostly studio recordings for like the first 10 years of my career, then started working at the university. And so now I teach music production, electronic music production using Ableton Live, mastering audio, and we teach a summer camp for students. So I teach music production for 2 weeks, and I have a full week-long dedicated Ableton Live class that we teach at the camp as well. So I've played in industrial and pop rock bands, and now I just do my own experimental stuff. So I kind of do a lot of sound design and stuff using Ableton Live devices. I love mixing up racks and stuff like that. That's probably my favorite thing to do. So that's me.
And I already introduced myself, but just in case you guys forgot, my name is Zach. And in addition to making kind of down-tempo, experimental, bass-heavy music, I am the program director of the Ableton program here at KMG. So I run all the Ableton classes and designed our whole Ableton curriculum here. One more question for you guys before we kind of open up to the audience. What's your favorite audio effect inside of Live?
Audio what?
Audio effect.
Same order.
What's that?
I'll go.
Any order you want.
I was going to say saturator, but since Live 9.5, it's the auto filter because I use it on every single track. And now it has the analog modeled filters, which I crank the drive and use kind of like a saturator. So probably say auto filter.
I would say I love beat repeat. Got a lot of cool parameters hooked to a lot of different things on my iPad, so I can do a lot or little with really a touch of a button, and it kind of adds some nice randomness to a static looping section.
Mine is probably Echo, because I like the ability to create sort of dub-style feeding back delays and automating those, attaching LFOs to them and making some weird wobbly sounds. So I like the everything that you can do about Echo, the analog nature of it, and the fact that you can have feedback greater than 95%, which is I was waiting on for a while. So Echo, and then also probably I'm a big fan of utility because you can do a lot of little cool stuff with that. So, flipping the phase and monoing low frequency stuff. So I think utility, if you're not hip to that, all for little things, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with that.
And then to answer my own question, I was going to say ping pong delay, but then Echo I think has kind of overshadowed ping pong delay just in terms of its flexibility and what you can do with it. But ping pong delay is just like all-time favorites. Like my heart will always be ping pong delay, even though it's going away.
I was going to say, are you sad that there is no
I'm
more
actually
ping pong
really sad.
delay?
I keep looking for it, and it's not there anymore.
Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so for those guys who don't know, Live 10.1 is in beta right now, and there's a bunch of new features and cool stuff involved in that. One of them is that they took the simple delay and the ping pong delay and combined it into a new effect that's just called delay. That's basically both of them put together. But I just like the interface of the ping pong delay because I'm using it for such a long time. So it was very sad for me that they got rid of it.
But really all the same features.
It's really all the same features, yeah. It's much more of an emotional thing than a logical thing.
That's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like they didn't really ditch
Yeah,
it.
nothing-
Just added to it.
Only
Yeah.
things were added, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So we got a microphone out here in the audience. Anybody want to volunteer to give us some questions?
Oh yeah, he done shot.
What's up, guys? So some of you know me. I'm one of the AMP or Ableton instructors here actually at KMG. I just had a question going off of what we were talking about with delay. How did they figure out the backwards compatibility with that? Do you know, with having a new device mapped to either ping pong or simple delay? Does it just do that automatically, or?
Does it keep the mappings?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you had all kinds of macro mappings and all that stuff set up in an old project, and you open it in the new version, how do they do everything?
I'm pretty sure the old devices are still there. So if you made something in ping pong delay and then you open a new thing, the ping pong delay is still there as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
It's just you can't add new ping pong delays.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I haven't. Zach hit it right in the head. I haven't tried anything that's embedded inside of a rack or anything that has like some really specific intelligent mapping. But as far as the devices themselves, they'll just automatically show up in new set if there was a simple or ping pong delay.
Gotcha. Another question, just to keep it going.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing that you've ever like recorded live with Ableton? Like weirdest sound source?
That's a really good question. Anybody want to go first?
Meaning you're kind of looking for.
Just like bizarre things, like there's guys like Richard Devine. I just saw him on his Instagram. He recorded the inside of his dryer the other day with like shoes tumbling around in there just to record some weird stuff. So.
Oh, well, I guess, yeah, I've had random, with friends, kids, and stuff where they make weird sounds with their voice, And I was like, that's cool. And I'll even just do that on my phone or something, or even from the video on the phone, and then import that, and it's really incredible. And I forget what it is, but I labeled it kind of cleverly so it'll like jog my memory, but then I kind of get numb to it, and then 8 years go by, and then I was like, really, what is that thing? And then I'd take off the little effects and like I transposed it and did a reverse on it and whatever, and then you go, oh yeah, that was Jeremy from that summer trip. I forgot that, because they have these little cool. There's this one that sounds like sort of a cicada or something, like this weird little insect, and it's like this little kid doing his thing. I just think it's cool how you can just grab a little section of it, and you would never know what the source is, right?
Probably for me, it was like, at least in recent memory, I got the if you haven't seen those, the Sennheiser binaural headphones made by Apogee and Sennheiser, you can plug into your phone and do binaural recording. And I took a soda can, I kind of filled it with just a little bit of water, and I was like kind of banging against the sink and getting weird little, binaural recordings of clinks and splooshes and weird sort of pitched, sounds. And I grabbed those and I started putting those in pieces with a bunch of different sounds. It's nice because then I'll use the phone app and I'll have that linked to my Dropbox, a special folder in my Dropbox. Then I'll have the Dropbox folder as one in my live browser. So anytime I record something, I just hit a button and it just uploads from the phone straight to Dropbox. And then within a few seconds, it shows up right in my live browser. Wow. So it's easy to use.
This one wasn't mine, but I want to take credit for it. Another teacher at another different school I used to work at used to hand his students a pine cone and then a microphone and said, make me a song using just the pine cone. And so you could do whatever you want with the pine cone. You could hit it, you could throw it, you could toss it, you could make weird sounds, but it had to be all pine cone. So I thought that was a really cool way to do it. I haven't actually tried it yet, but some of my students showed me some pine cone songs they made, and they were really, really good.
Two come to mind. One was recording feedback. So we were kind of experimenting with like taking 1/4-inch cables and like plugging the out of the speaker into the in of the interface and just like clicking a sound and like recording these nasty controlled feedback loops. That was pretty fun. And then the other one was I was working on some project and I wanted like this effect of like me walking into my studio. So I had some music playing on my monitors, and I was just recording the sound of my monitors from another room and then walking into the room. And it turned out pretty cool. Yeah.
One more. I finally remember one that I did. I needed some weird textural sounds to be in the background of a song, so I took a microphone and I drew, just sketching some weird shapes and things like that. And so it's me like scribbling on a piece of paper to make these like cool, like arrhythmic kind of sounds.
Huh.
And it's just a pencil on paper.
That might be worth mentioning that then, if you're not aware, the update that's coming up, 10.1, now you can actually import your own audio into Wavetable. So that could be a cool. No one will ever have that. You're out recording this weird thing out in the meadow, and then you import that in there and create your own sounds. It's great.
Cool. You want to pass the microphone? Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Jorgen. I'm a student here right now. If there's like what's one technique or change to your workflow that like drastically increased the quality of your music? If you had to pick one thing that you'd like make sure everyone was doing.
I would probably say it's much more of like a mental thing than a technical thing, but just working faster and thinking less. Just like creating lots of things and kind of like throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, rather than like painstakingly trying to get every detail perfect when I start a song. Just trying to like sit down and just write and let it flow and be less attached to perfection and be less attached to making it sound a certain way. Is something that I think I'm always struggling with, because I'm such a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect right at the bat. And so I'm trying to get more in the habit of just like making lots and lots of stuff and caring less about everything being exactly the way I want it to. And that's helped me out quite a bit.
I think customizing the live default template as well as the default instance of the devices. I used to always for example, I always grab the compressor and then I always make sure I turn off the auto gain on there, because it always makes me crazy because I just grew up not ever using that sort of function, so taking that time to make sure I don't have to undo that every time I grab the device, or when I open up a live template, instead of, it has a reverb setting that I want to use instead of like the default one that's kind of designed for everybody to use. I have a more powerful machine, so I can make sure that I can make sure my reverb's on high setting and I can dial in the setting I want and replace the standard. I don't go too crazy, but I just replace the standard delay with an echo with the settings that I usually like to use on it. So find devices that you commonly use and make sure to adjust those defaults, so when you grab it, you don't have to go and change the reverb efficiency setting or the compressor setting or the echo setting. So it just makes things a lot quicker going through those defaults, and don't have to think about that. It's the way I want it to use it right off the bat.
Yeah, I would just say in general, session view, it definitely changed my world, and so I'm more about live performance, and with that, it allows you so much flexibility of just being in one open-ended. You get to choose when you move on in the song, and along with that, I'd have to say the looper device is also a massive thing for me, being able to go audio on audio, but it's really software that's cool. So that changed it, and that was already 10 years ago. So anybody that's on the fence, I would always say Ableton's the thing, man, because you can do all that other stuff that you just want to do as a regular producer, arrangement view, but then the session view kind of changes your world and maybe the way you're thinking of how to create a song, like Zach's saying, and you're mixing up these ideas in a different way.
Did the looper come out in Live 8?
Yeah, yeah.
Was it
2008, I think.
Yeah, 8 then.
Live 8, yeah.
I guess mine would be is not getting, I don't want to say confused, but not getting distracted in the music making process. And for me, it was always, you have all these sounds, and you also have good idea, but how to keep going with the good idea and not worry about like the mixing aspect or the sound design of it, because a good idea can be really, really strong. Like an example, I don't know if you guys seen that there was a that company Masterclass, and they do like these lessons with famous chefs and sports people and musicians. There's one with Timbaland where he's basically like composing, but he's singing all the parts. And it's like, that's a good idea, and it sounds good because it goes good with this other idea. And then he'll figure out like what drums and synths and basses you want later. But the fact that he can hear that those three ideas really link together is the most important part. So sometimes I'll do this as I'll compose with one sound source. So I'll try to compose a whole piece with like, let's say a sine wave. And the only constraint that you have is that you can use the amplitude envelope. So, okay, so percussion ideas, I'm going to make a really blippy sound, play it low or play it high. Those are the drums. I'll figure out exactly what drums are going to be there. I can make pads, I can make melodies, and then I'm really focused to key in on like the music of it and the arrangement and worry about everything else later. So that's made a big help for me. I also do that with the piano too, because the piano kind of naturally works really well with all the frequencies. So like, for example, if you go to a piano and you play some chords really low, and then you play a melody really low, it's going to sound like crap. It's going to sound really mushy. You know, that's not a mixing issue. That's an arrangement issue. So if you figure out like which octaves all of your ideas are going to go to first, then when you go to mix, you're just going to make your life so much easier. So focusing more on those kind of things, and gain staging. try to understand gain staging. Lauren mentioned utility. I also use utility on every track, and usually I'm turning things down all the time. So that also helps my music sound good.
Anybody else have any questions? Just pass over there.
Yeah, so I know a lot of you guys are familiar with push, and if you're not, I'll ask another ancillary question. But basically, like with push, like what's your favorite or most useful, maybe like hidden feature or like thing that you love using with it? And then if you don't have push or you're not familiar with it, then like what's your favorite like keyword shortcut in Ableton that's like most useful to you?
Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I'll probably say, can I do 2 again?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
go for it. Say as many as you want.
I've been cheating on every question, giving 2 answers. One is going to be the convert button. Because, for example, you can record something in from a microphone, and then with the convert button, it does a ton of things with one button. It'll add a track, it'll bring a simpler into the track, and it'll take the audio that it recorded and put it in the simpler, which then you can slice up. So the convert button changed my world. And then the repeat button. And I use it on melodic instruments. So I'll take a sound, put on the repeat, and then add a little bit of swing, and it's kind of just like this super funky thing that gets a lot of ideas flowing.
What he said. Yeah, you know what? I really love the playing a synth or a bass line and using the scale feature. And I'm kind of surprised that I would like it that way, because 2 things. I'm actually a pianist, accomplished jazz pianist, so I know a lot about theory and voicings. So I like playing the piano. So I know how to play in key, but the feel of that, and I have different patterns that you would play that you wouldn't normally do. So I kind of like there's a little more mystery to it. And then they have so many scales. Now they added scales even in 10.1. So it's like you dial it in and all of the notes are going to work. So that's great for if you're feeling a little bit self-conscious about your harmony is a little limited. All the bad notes go away. Everything you see there is fair game, man. And then the dark colored one is the root, you know. So it's really kind of changed my world too. I'm playing the keyboard literally here, and then now I'm going to solo over it, but I'm not having to like kind of dance over the black keys, right? It's just all even. So it's really, really great. Check out the scale.
kind of building on what Darren said, with the way the scales are laid out on the keyboard, probably my favorite thing is like, I'm not an accomplished keyboard player. I'm a mediocre keyboard player at best. And so, like, my hands naturally go, when I'm playing on a keyboard, my hands naturally go into certain positions and certain versions of the chords. And so that kind of like limits me physically to what my results are. But when I switch to a scale inside a push, it changes because I don't have that same position that I put my hands in, and I get more interesting different voice. He sees me doing it right here on the table. This is my chord. That's my chord hand. So it puts my hand in different positions, and I wind up getting different, more interesting, and more varied chord voicings, and so I get more melodic options and experiments that I stumble upon, which it kind of opens up someone who's a mediocre keyboard player and gives me like more creative options and accidents.
And I might add one little tidbit to that. If you're limited on ability and stuff, then you pull in an arpeggiator MIDI effect, and you're just golden. Every note's going to be awesome. I'm holding down 5 notes. I don't even know what they are. I don't care what they are. And then the arpeggiator's on there, and it's going boop boop deep and beep and boop beep bum. And then you dial in the gate or whatever on the knobs on the top, right, of the push, and all of a sudden it can go from boop boop deep and beep to right. And did you get that? And it's fun, so I would recommend it.
I think that 2 of my favorite kind of like hidden features on the push. One is you can change the color of tracks, clips, and even slots on the drum racks. So you can color code everything by holding on Shift and either hitting a track, Shift and hitting a clip when you're in session mode, or Shift and then hitting the drum pads, which is really useful for in live performance. If you want certain drum pads to be certain colors, you can label things so you know that, like, okay, reds are my kicks and then blues are my snares or something like that. So just the color coding functionality, it's not something that I like need necessarily, but it's just like one of those quality of life things that's really helpful. In addition, another kind of weird hidden thing that a lot of people don't know about is the pitch bend on the side. If you hold on the select button and then hit the pitch bend, it becomes a mod wheel. So you can switch back and forth between mod wheel and pitch bend if you want to be using one or both of those things. And then since you mentioned key commands, probably all-time favorite key commands, Command D for duplicate. It's just all the time. Duplicate a track, duplicate a clip, duplicate MIDI notes. And then duplicate time, Shift Command D in arrangement view, and then delete time, Shift Command delete, just to delete whole sections of your song or duplicate whole sections of your song, are probably some of my favorite key commands.
Can I say something else about push?
Sure.
Well, another feature that there's certain things that push can do that are either hard to do in live or you just can't do in live natively, and one of that is fixed length audio recording. So for a MIDI clip, it's easy. You can double-click an empty clip slot and type in the number of measures that you want for MIDI, but you can't necessarily do that with audio. So if you're recording your voice or your guitar or your bass or any instrument, like an acoustic instrument, if you have fixed length on and push, it'll automatically stop recording at the end of that. So it's really nice for like capturing a whole whole list of like different song ideas, or if you're into live looping, that's something that's saved my butt many times. And the other thing, this might be super nerdy, but so when you go into like the sidechain menu in the compressor and you have to select the sidechain input, and then you see like every 100, you see all of the instrument cells pre, post, and post mixer. Well, in Push, they have like a really elegant UI where you can select pre or post. Then when you go to your input list, you only see the 7 or 8 different instruments from the selection menu. So it's a lot easier actually to select your sidechain input on Push than it is from live, in my opinion. So
I just want to interject a little side note on that. If you're ever in one of those drop-down menus, like for the inputs and outputs on a channel, anything like that, you can click on it to show the drop-down menu and then just start typing, and it'll actually search the list and like pull up whatever you need. So if you have a huge list of channels, and you want to pick a specific one for an input, you just click to show the drop-down, start typing the channel name, and it'll automatically grab it. Way easier than, you can just start typing. Another little hidden thing. So
I did not know that. Cool. I'm going to pass the microphone around to who wants to go next. You got a question over here?
All right. Hi, my name is Jacob, and I just had a question regarding the Ableton Reverb. I know a lot of people can hate on the reverb. A lot of people like it. I just want to get your guys' opinion on the Ableton Reverb versus like third-party plugins. Maybe any tips with like the EQ feature in the reverb itself, decay time, size.
For like 80% of the stuff I use, I think the reverb is fine. The thing is, if you check out the stock reverb on every single digital audio workstation, I would rate Ableton Live's the best. But it's not going to capture like acoustic spaces like you can with an impulse response reverb like Altiverb was probably my main one that I use. But they have an impulse response reverb that's inside Max for Live that's included with Ableton Live Suite, so you can actually use those impulse responses in there. So if you count Ableton Live Suite and use that reverb unit, that one sounds fantastic. And the Ableton Live reverb's pretty good. It's more like to feel like it feels like it puts it more in a space, but not like a specific space. Like it's sort of a more general sound, which a lot of times that's what you want. I just want to put it in a little bit of space. I want to like add some distance to something, and so I use the Ableton Live reverb that way. And so for the majority of the time, I'll use that. You know, if I'm using a vocal, I might want like a plate sounding reverb, so I'll use something else. But if I want to just put a little space on the synth or something like that, 80% of the time I'm grabbing the Ableton Live reverb. I just make sure I switch it to off of economy mode, which is the default. So I recommend going in there and change that to high and hitting save to default, so you don't have to worry about that ever again, like I don't. And other than that, experiment with the width. I mean, there's a lot of technical things that go into reverb. You can, psychoacoustically, adjust pre-delay to determine sort of the physical size of the room and stuff like that. But I wouldn't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Find a good time, size, and pre-delay, and and experiment with it, because it has a lot of functionality to it. I've done some stuff where I've done really cool effects where I actually create a reverb feeding into itself, and that creates these really gorgeous sounds. And I love the way that the live sounds when I do that. And I've experimented with third-party reverbs to get different sounds. But I think it's very useful. It's not fantastic. You can't do like a plate sound with it, but for putting something in a space, I think it's really great. Especially compared to like Deverb and Pro Tools or. So we use that. It has its place, but as far as stock reverbs go, that's probably one of the better ones you'll run into. But it's not super dense. It's kind of got a medium density to it, so it's good for putting things into a space.
Yeah, I would agree with basically everything Lauren just said. I think it can do a lot of work for you. However, it's not going to be like the perfect reverb for every situation. One thing I think is really important to point out is the default device for the reverb is slightly different than what defaults on your return track. And so I feel like the default settings on the return track, I'm not a big fan of. And so a lot of times I'll just delete that and then replace that with the default one and then tweak settings from there. And I think that tends to sound better. I'm not sure what these settings are supposed to be emulating on the return track, but I'm not in love with those settings. But if you replace it with your own and then tweak it a little bit from there, you can get a lot better results out of it.
I won't repeat everything they said because I agree with all of it. But one thing that Lauren mentioned was the pre-delay. Typically when I'm adjusting features like the dry wet, the decay time are always kind of like manually adjusted. And then the pre-delay, and that's usually timed to some type of musical value, either a quarter note, half note, eighth note, something like that. Just to time with the tempo of the music. Also, do you know about this global quality setting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, put that in high, and then sometimes I'll put some input processing on it, where I'll use the low cut feature to remove some of the low frequencies from the reverb.
Awesome.
And don't hesitate to EQ the output of a reverb. If it's like it seems too dense, grab an EQ8 and just cut some like the low mid out of there. If you want a little more airy, use that. I mean that functionality is actually pretty cool, but you don't have the same EQ quality that you would with an EQ8. Professional studios do that all the time. EQ the output of reverb. You should be able to do the same thing in your DAW.
I will also often, if we're talking about reverbs on return tracks, put a compressor after it. For some reason, it tends to be pretty quiet, even if you're cranking up the send knob. So I'll do basically what Lauren's saying, have a reverb first, then an EQ, and then a little bit of compression after the EQ to bring it back up a little bit. So this is often what my reverb chain will look like.
Do you use the convolution reverb, or do you know about that?
I've experimented with it, but I usually just go stock Ableton, put it on high. Mess around with the low cut a little bit, but yeah, I don't EQ it all after, and the compression's another great idea that I need to definitely check out.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Who wants to go next?
Just to work off that a little bit, my name is Catherine, by the way. I have been really curious about what type of EQs to buy in terms of like plugins, because it seems like there's a ton of really cool ones out there, but I have no idea what to invest in, and it seems like the EQ8 definitely has its limitations. So I was just wondering, like, how much do you guys actually use the EQ8 and how much do you never use it and use only third-party plugins?
I use the EQ8 all the time.
Okay.
It's quick, it's easy, it gets the job done. On occasion, I might use FabFilter or ProQ. But honestly, I used to use a lot more, and I'm, especially in the last couple of years, been shifting to more and more just straight EQ8 across the board on everything.
Okay, that's what I've been doing on my tracks. I do exactly that, actually. I put the compression after it, but I don't really know if I'm could this sound so much better with a better EQ? But I just haven't really known which one to invest in because there's so many.
Like Zach, I use EQ8 all the time in live. But my favorite EQ of all time, the one I've used the most is and I do a lot of work in Pro Tools mixing records and stuff like that, is the Waves Renaissance EQ. And you can catch that on sale, and it sounds great. It has a nice musical quality to it. Fab filters, I've been trying to get into more Fab filter stuff because I can do a lot of really cool stuff because you can also do linear phase processing if you want to. But I think EQ8 sounds great. A lot of people will bag on stock EQ plugins, and in one of my classes, my Master Advanced Digital Audio class, I'll do listening, like a blind listening test, where I'll dial in the exact same EQ setting, and I'll use 8 different EQs. I'll dial in the exact same setting, usually pretty drastic, and we'll all blindly listen and rate and kind of choose our favorites. And always in the top, 25% is the Renaissance EQ. You can't go wrong with that. And you can catch it on sale from Waves, but the stock EQs always pleasantly surprise people. It's usually in the top third. They're all, and EQ8 falls into that same category. It sounds pretty much the exact same as the DigiDesign Avid one. So I wouldn't hate the EQ8, and it's perfectly fine for me. But in Pro Tools, I'll use Renaissance EQ or Fab Filter.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm using EQ8, and I even do the 3 sometimes, just especially on a big general, like if you're just going, wow, I record a lot of horns and stuff, and actually it gives it a little different vibe if I want to just not get too crazy about it. It's about the performance, I'm thinking. In general, I get that it can go way deep on the engineering side of it, but the whole purpose is really to feel something and hear this music, right? Mm-hmm. So I always try to take a step back, kind of like Zach saying, and be a little less perfectionist and go, wait, is this sitting well on the track, and is it serving the song? Is it serving the vibe that you're going for, right? So I think sometimes limiting yourself and thinking, this is what I need to make this tune pop, is maybe not necessarily the answer either, right? It could just be the content. And actually, it really matters about recording with the quality sound of whatever you're doing. A good mic, good preamp, great vocal performance, and then we just do a little stuff with it instead of having to like squeeze all this juice out of this one little mini idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I use the EQ8 primarily. It's also it's a native live plugin, which means I can use a lot of them, and with little effect to the CPU usage on my computer, which means I can use a lot of them on a lot of tracks. I also use the preview feature on the EQ8, which comes in handy many times, and then also the mid-side EQing function in EQ8. So,
Can you explain the mid-side?
Zach, can you bring that up?
Sure. Yeah, we got an EQA right here. If you go to the mode and switch it from stereo, I don't know, well, you can see that.
I
There's
see.
left-right mode and there's mid-side mode.
Got it.
So in mid-side mode, you can have one EQ curve for the middle of your stereo field and a different EQ curve for the side of your stereo field.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if you have like if you have like a drum kit or something like that, and you want to like bring out the air in the cymbals, but you want to make you don't want the snare to be much brighter. The mid-side EQ is great for that.
And you get 8 EQ bands per either mid or side.
That's awesome.
Or you could do left and right. So you could have one EQ curve for your left side, one EQ for your right side.
Super cool.
Yeah, I love EQA. It's like I said, it's super lightweight. It's super easy to use. It's like it's quick. It's easy. It gets the job done. It's one of the reasons I like it.
A ton of presets, right? I mean, but you can start from scratch. Everyone knows you can pull the device, any device, from the raw root, right? And then it's, you want something like drum rack or whatever.
For what are we doing?
like instead of using the presets that are there, you can just drag the drum rack over to a track.
Oh,
and
yeah.
now
Just the
it's
default
empty.
device.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and start from scratch. So don't feel, it's kind of neat to take something they've said they think is cool and then just make little tweaks, and then we all know about saving, right? The preset on the very right there, yeah, and then save it as your own.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you master your music in Ableton? Or do you use other programs to do that?
Yes.
Sorry,
so,
is that like a really insane, hard,
No,
overarching question?
No,
But-
actually, somebody asked me this question 2 days ago. So
I think mastering means different things.
So, like if I finish a song, I finish like mixing it all together, and then I'm like, okay, well, it sounds really far away. I want to bring everything together. I've been like exporting my song, and then just bringing that one audio track in, and then trying to master over that, which is like kind of a joke because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. So then I'm just using all these plugins and messing around in a couple third-party plugins. But I'm wondering if that's like, yeah, what other people are doing, or if that's just like something I'm doing off of.
yeah, that sounds pretty much exactly how I do my own mastering for my own tracks. Is I'll finish the mix, bounce it out as a stereo file with
Yeah.
about 6 decibels of headroom, and then bring it back into an entirely new session in the arrangement view.
Yeah.
Put on my mastering chain, tweak all my mastering settings, check it with the reference track, and then bounce that out again. This can be kind of the process.
So you are doing that. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, that's I mean, ideally, I think mastering would be done with hardware. So you run it through a bunch of hardware, and that's how you get like the really nice, mastering sound. But if you can't afford to do that, and you're doing it yourself, then you're doing it basically the way you and I are doing it, which is running through software versions of the hardware to kind of get that mastering sound.
I teach a whole class on mastering, and so I typically
You
will
condense
use
it to 30 seconds.
I typically will use Pro Tools, but you can do mastering perfectly fine in live. A couple of things to do when you're importing those long files: make sure you have a warp turned off.
Yeah.
And live isn't as robust of an editor as like Pro Tools is. So if you want to like trim some things, they don't try to be. They don't try to be something that they're not excellent at, which is what I like. But I mean, a couple pointers if you're mastering inside of live, is that when I initially bounce, I won't put anything across the stereo bus except for maybe the glue compressor, and then when I master it in live. I will, do my mastering chain, EQ compression, and Utility actually does some great, is really fantastic. Use that mono, the bass function, where mono's low frequencies, since we don't have any directionality for like 100 hertz and below, so Utility is perfect for that. And then also use a third-party digital limiter. Live's limiter is great for making things
loud and kind of in your face, but it doesn't have like the gentleness that you'd want for a master to make things louder. So if you use like an L2 or an L3 or the Massey's L2007, I think Voxengo's Elephant is supposed to be really good as well. I mean, there's a lot of options out there for really good third-party digital limiters, but the Waves L2 and L3, those are very, very standard industry digital limiters that have been around forever. And also, if you're sending it for streaming, try to make sure that you're loud, the metering. Make sure that your LUFS or your average loudness isn't, well, you want to make, I'm going to go on for an hour, so I'm just going to keep this.
I've been trying to keep everything to like -11. I don't know. I feel like
if the average hits -11, that's pretty good, because all the streaming services, except for Apple Music, are going to bring it down to minus. They change it all the time. -14, I believe. Because Apple Music does -16. So if it's above that, they'll bring it down. If it's below that, only Spotify will turn it up. So make sure you're like above that. So if you're hitting -11, then you're only being brought down 3 dB. I would experiment with how does -13 sound versus -11. Do I like the dynamics of one better than the other? Because they're both going to be played back at the same loudness on any of the streaming services. It's not going to matter as long as you're above that threshold that they use. But also find a good metering plug-in. Like, there's free ones out there. I use the Isotopes Insight because that's really good for measuring loudness as well. But there's other plugins options out there that are free. So I'll stop there, otherwise I'll go on for the next 5 hours.
$2 cents on that. I guess it is worth getting some fresh ears on it too. I mean, Zach is saying, yeah, if you can't afford it, that is a issue. But and now I've never done it, but disc makers and all these, they do a service of it. I don't know how it is or not, but fairly reasonable, $50-$75 or something a tune.
Yeah.
So
I just know with the bands that I've been in, when we used to like master things, we'd send them off to some guy and it would be like $150 a song, and seemed super legit, but I was like, for what I'm doing on my own, like there's got to be a way to make it passable.
Yeah, I'm sure it's passable then. Yeah, and they have, under the audio effects, they have all the effects racks. They have a lot of presets and already put together for you, so that's a good place to start too. But it is cool to, everyone knows you can actually save your whole, collect and save your live set, right? And send it to somebody else, and then they can open it up and work their magic on it. So I've done that. Great keyboard player out in LA, Scott Kinsey. His CDs just sound so good, so dynamic and full, and I was just like, man, would you do mine? And that's what he was, 150 a tune.
Yeah.
And I sent him the Ableton file, and he actually did a once-over on the mix on the stems, and then did a mastering thing on it. And, so it was all over email and stuff, and it came out great. So that's fun, too. That's another idea. Don't expect that you have to do everything. I'm kind of that guy, too, and I'm finally seeing the light. You don't have to do that. Do what you do, and someone else is a killer master person, and let them do that and pay them to do it and be happy about it,
Yeah, I'm probably more in Darren's perspective and maybe other people's perspective too, where I don't pretend to be a great mastering engineer or a mastering engineer at all. Like, maybe I'll sit in on Lauren's class and learn a few things about mastering. But I do use the tools that I have accessible to me the best that I can. So I have Ozone, and I've read the Ozone manual to learn what the different parameters and features do so that I could use Ozone to the best of my abilities. There's also, if you go in the browser, under audio effects, there's a category for mixing and mastering tools, and there's some mastering racks that come with Live. And I've used a few of those, and I understand what those do, so I can manipulate those to kind of get a really good sounding track. The professional projects that I work in, usually I'm not involved in the deliverables of the final master, so usually another artist or another co-writer is responsible for that. So a lot of times I don't see that phase of the project, but for the things that I do work on, those are a couple of things that I use all the time.
It might be worth mentioning, just 20 feet that way used to be air show mastering, which was everybody around Denver Boulder knew about it, literally in this building, like right through the bathroom there, where they have all the pushes in that other room. And I dropped almost $7,000 on mastering. Some of it was sort of a teaching thing and experimenting with some stuff, but David Glasser, many people around here know of him. So that puts some things in perspective. So I had 13 tunes, like 72 minutes of music, like full-blown 50, 60 tracks, highly, funk, Latin stuff, lots of horns, lots of guitars, all sorts of things, very dense mixes, and so that can get expensive. So yeah, that could be a whole album, right, of money. So there's many levels you can do it at, but maybe reaching out. But the other thing is, be curious. He mentioned using reference tracks. That's super. Put on the Opio track, the Tipper track, and go, I want to get close to that. How do I do that? And then you're listening, go, mine just sounds kind of dumpy and middle rangey, and it's not that. So then how? Read, scour the internet, experiment, and then you kind of get farther down the path,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mastering to me is kind of like the dark voodoo of the audio world, where everybody knows it's important, but everybody's terrified of it.
And music theory.
Yeah, and music theory. I think mastering is even scarier for a lot of people because there's not a lot of good information out there. Like music theory, there's lots of lessons and there's information and it's available. If you look at mastering on YouTube or on the internet, it's a pretty mixed bag of what you're going to get. And it's really hard to tell the good information from the bad. But if you're a student and you're really dedicated to it, you can definitely teach yourself a lot of stuff about it. But it takes a lot of time, mostly because your ear has to really be able to listen to like little tiny details and changes in dynamics and things like that. So don't expect to be good at mastering anytime soon. It takes a lot of practice. It's taken me a really long time just to feel like I get the basics down before I even actually had any good masters done.
And part of what you're paying for with the mastering is the insane speakers, right?
Yeah.
Sets of speakers where you're listening to everything on your one set and some headphones and then in your car, right? So although those are like the three main ones, so if it sounds pretty good there and it compares well to the thing your reference track, then give it a go. I mean, like, call it a day, write another tune.
And one thing I'll just add is if you're interested in mastering, check out, there's a pretty good book called by Bob Katz called Mastering Audio, Katz, K-A-T-Z. He's just pretty much...
I watched a master class with him.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though, and this is what makes me crazy, is all the big-name mastering engineers, they're very protective of their craft, and so they won't tell you what they're doing or why or how. So you will not get any good information as to how to do it from the big-name mastering engineers because they're super protective to the point where they actually make stuff up. Makes me crazy. They literally do. Like, I could go on for another 5 hours. I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah, that's a super big question that people are always asking about is mastering because they said like not a good info about.
Yeah, I would say that I found the least information on the interwebs about mastering, or just like these like really basic chains that I'm like that just can't be.
Yeah, a lot of it you just kind of have to figure out for yourself as you go,
Yeah.
kind of like trial and error and learn little by little.
And train your ears to hear it different.
Yeah, but we could definitely keep talking about mastering all night. But I want to make sure that anybody else have any questions?
This is a two-part question, I guess. It's kind of related to the EQ one. I'm curious, like, when you're doing the blind study with all the EQs, like, what are you actually listening for? Like, what are the subtleties that you're hearing between the difference between the different EQs? And just for, like, minute details in mastering and all of that, how would you recommend going about training your ears to hear those subtle things?
I would certainly go about training your ears by doing things as blind as you possibly can. You know, I'll just kind of like, rename all the tracks to some random letter and shuffle the order around so I don't know what exactly I'm listening to. But when I'm listening to EQs, like some will sound more harsh because EQ does a phase shift, and some of that phase shift can create a harshness of the audio. And so I'm looking for just musicality, harshness, but also varies upon style too. So sometimes I'll do the same thing with digital limiters. I was mastering a sort of like this 90s style punk rock record, and I would go through and I would sit there and I was like, they want to make it loud, okay, so I'll set a loud setting. I'll use a half a dozen digital limiters that I have and listen to find which one sounds the best
and it can vary on each particular style of music. So there's not one like golden perfect digital limiter or EQ or whatever. It just depends on the style. So I would A/B it in the style, and honestly, just trust your ears. You know, you're a consumer of music. We're all consumers of music. We know what we like to hear. Try to get rid of that nerdy engineering mindset and say, does this sound good to me? And that's what really matters. Don't spend a whole lot of time, does the graphical interface, does my curve on the EQ look right? No, just does it sound good? Does it help the sound? Does it hurt the sound? Just kind of just break it down to very basics in that sort of way. Don't overthink it. You know, I try to get as much people doing as much stuff on their own as possible. We're in a DIY era, so I'm not going to say you need to send it to a super fancy mastering engineer. You know, if you learn some basics with just EQ, compressor, and a digital limiter, that's 90% of what you need to know for mastering. So, but as far as EQs go, just trust your ears, trust yourself.
And one thing about that with the EQ on a certain thing, you're talking 40, 50 tracks. Yeah, not just 4 or 8 things on some sort of mellow vibe, but I'm saying like kind of an aggressive. I do a lot with live instruments too, so a lot of horns, a lot of rhythm section instruments, actually playing instruments. You end up with all this stuff, but you want everything to live in a certain place. But then you go, wait, it's a little muddy there on that guitar. But then you solo it, and then you're EQing it and everything, and then you kind of start going down that rabbit hole, and then you're just thinking about that one, and it's all about going back to the overall and go, how is this sitting in this track with all of these instruments playing, instead of you're soloing it and getting too critical about. I mean, I'm all about details, so don't get me wrong, but it's good to keep always refreshing your memory. But how is this sitting in? The guitar actually sounds a little bit nasally, but then you listen to the actual track and you aren't sensing that. It's like a really interesting thing. There's a phenomenon that's happening, right? It's living in that, so it's thin by itself, but that's what it needs for that track, you know.
Was there a second part to your question?
No, it's just what you're hearing, and then how you train yourself to hear it, I guess.
Lauren, there's when you do your EQ testing, there's another EQ that's coming out, the channel EQ, which is a new 3-band that's also circuit modeled. So I'd be interested to know how that.
Check that out.
Yeah.
And just to kind of comment on the ear training thing, I think a lot of it just comes down to like active listening. Like when you're listening to either your own music or other people's music, especially other people's music, don't just ask yourself, does this sound good or not? Do I like this or not? But like, why does this sound good? What about this song makes it really like fit together or gel together? Is it the mixing? Is it the arrangement? Is it like the musicality? Like what's going on here? And that way, when you are approaching your own songs, like use that same kind of ear to try to like figure out, could this be better? Do I like this? Do I not like it? Specifically, like what are the little tiny details in the mix that are sticking out that shouldn't be sticking out, or how can I tweak it a little bit? And I definitely resonate with what Lauren said about just like close your eyes and like turn off the screen. Like don't look at the screen and just sit there and listen. And a lot of times what I'll do is, especially when it comes to mixing, instead of working on different parts of the song, I'll listen to the entire song from the beginning to end. And while I'm listening to it, I'll write down things that I notice that are not sitting right to me. And then I'll go and I'll fix all those things. And then I'll listen to the whole thing beginning to end and then write down everything I hear that needs to be changed. As opposed to starting on one section and then getting distracted by something else and then coming back to it. And then you get the situations where you like turn something up by a decibel and then turn it down by a decibel and a half and then turn it up by 3/4 of a decibel and then turn it down by half a decibel. And that just takes forever. And so I found that by doing kind of like a to-do list whenever I'm mixing or getting to that stage of things, and just knocking the things off the to-do list one at a time, ends up saving me a lot of time, and it helps me really kind of like focus on listening first and then doing later, as opposed to trying to do both at the same time.
Musicians, for a long time, they do ear training, where they'll play 2 different pitches, and they'll practice, okay, what's the name of that interval? And they'll play another pitch. Then they'll add more pitches and say, what's the name of that chord? What's the quality? So that when people that play by ear, without any music or talking or anything, they know what key they're in, the chord progression, the scales and things like that. And there's an equivalence for audio. An audio engineer is training your ear to hear, different, instead of musical pitches, but frequency bands and steepness of curves, and then also compression levels. So there was an old product called Golden Ears, which you might be able to find it somewhere on the internet, but it was a series of like CDs that was like an online, it was an ear training program for audio engineers. There might be an equivalent to now, but something like that where it's essentially like weightlifting for your ears as an audio professional is very, very helpful.
And what was the other one? You told me Syntorial.
What's it called?
There's a website called Sound Gym. That's exactly what it is.
Sound Gym. Okay, there you go.
There's a couple free lessons, I think. Otherwise, it is a paid subscription to do all of the courses, kind of like Udemy or any of the other music courses. But it's specifically ear training, where it'll be like it'll double blind show, like play one file that has an EQ boost in it and one that
Sound Gym.
Yeah.
I'm going to check that out. There's another one for if you're interested in synthesis. It's called Syntorial, like tutorial, but Syntorial. And there's a free part that's really, really great for learning how to train your ears to hear different synthesis types.
Like what's the difference between a sine wave and a saw wave? You know, that starts there. Yeah, and it has little tests built in, and it was great. He was the one that hit me to it, and I was like, whoa, this is like super like educational.
It goes really
deep. Yeah. And
what's funny is I'm actually teaching these workshops called Sonic Tonic, which is this concept right here, basically of comparing the qualities of a song to fine food tasting or a wine tasting or a cocktail. Going, wait, can you taste those subtle notes of that? What's the finish like? And you're really mindful and focused tasting, focused listening. So doing like a 3-hour event where we have like a cocktail and you're talking about the details of that, but then also then we're taking an Eagles tune and going, but why do you like this song? And have you ever noticed, most people don't, they hear the lyrics and then they hear a bunch of music behind it. They don't think anything past that. But how does a musician listen to music? Why am I excited about Hotel California? Do I need to hear that song again? No. It was just on yesterday. But did I hate it? I really didn't. Because then I start really going, man, that bass line is really awesome. That tune would be totally different if it wasn't. So I think it can open people's minds to going, all these little elements add up to a certain thing. So it's a great question where you're kind of saying, how do I get more aware of the EQ part of it, right? And that definitely is even a little over here. That's specialized listening. It's great. But that's why we come to these things. It's awesome. Go check out Sound Gym. What is that name? Sound Gym? Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else have any questions?
My question was about, I try to work through a bass through live, and it seems to be muddy when I try to like slap or pluck. I'll lose a lot of the ghost notes, and I just didn't know if there's any devices in live that would liven that up. I use an 18i Scarlett to try to make that better, but it didn't seem to make too much of a difference. Like the low end even seems to be, I don't know, just doesn't sound as natural as electric bass would coming out of an amp.
Because you're playing through what?
My interface is a Scarlett 18i.
Yeah, and then what with it live?
Well, just playing through my bass through live, my bass guitar.
Uh-huh.
It just comes out sounding like twangy and no low end. I just didn't know if there was devices in there that would like bring that out.
What I imagine is your bass amp is probably coloring the sound somehow, and then as soon as you're not playing through the amp anymore, you're just recording right into the computer.
It's just your
There's
bass.
EQ that's not happening anymore or whatever, so you might try just actually EQing the bass.
And I would check out, honestly, I don't use it all on just drums, but check out Drum Bus because it has a low frequency thing, so you can boost low frequency or add low frequencies to it, as well as transient adjustments. So if you're getting a lot of pluckiness and articulation that's too much, you can actually dial that down. And it also does it has a bunch of other functions in it too. But don't hesitate to take that Drum Bus and only use it on drums. I put it on a lot of things.
Do you know about the device called Spectrum?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably already have, but if you don't, I have a spectrum on the track. You can kind of see what frequencies you may be associating to the sounds that you hear.
You could also try miking your amp, like running your bass through your amp and then putting a mic in front of the amp and seeing if that like gets a more kind of like natural sound to you.
And play with a multi-band compressor because then you can just compress just like the low frequency and bring just that out.
Yeah, just trying to have the freedom of playing all at once, instead of I don't know, copy and paste. So I'm just trying to like live play like I would naturally. I don't know.
you're experiencing the exact problem that every singer is like, it's their nightmare, right? Like the way that their voice sounds just in a room compared to the way a mic captures it.
Yeah.
Like it's a never-ending battle to get that microphone to sound the way that they hear themselves in the room naturally. You're fighting the same thing. Right? The amp is doing one thing, you're getting directly to it. So
Just kind of mess with some
you
devices.
could also try putting like the amp device on the bass channel to actually amplify it, the same way as if it was going through the amp head. That might
to
be
widen
what's-
it or something.
Yeah, that might be what's missing is because you're not running it through the amp device inside live. It's really flat.
Very cool.
But once you dial it in, though, group it as an effect rack, and put it in your library. So that way, that's your bass chain.
Just plug and play. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fully, most of the time, yeah.
Who's got some more questions?
Yeah, so I had a question. Do you guys parallel compress a lot? And it's kind of a part 2 question. So with the multiband dynamics, like you were saying, I know the famous preset OTT. I just want you guys' opinion on that as well. Do you like, or do you think it's overused, or do you just kind of slap another multiband dynamics and kind of set the presets yourself in a way, or kind of adjust it to what you think the sound needs?
So I probably don't do as much parallel compression as I should. Every time I do parallel compression, I'm always like, oh yeah, I should do this more. And then I always forget about it later. As far as OTT and multiband dynamics goes, I'm not in love with multiband dynamics mostly because of the way the interface is set up. It feels like it's not very intuitive as opposed to just using a compressor. And then OTT, I kind of agree with what you said. Like it tends to be a little overused. It tends to be, when I see people using a lot of OTT, it tends to be people who are not as familiar with how a compressor works, but they just heard OTT is amazing, and so they toss it on there. And it works, but I think that I would much rather kind of like customize and set up my own compression settings. So I end up not using multiband dynamics, partially because of the interface more than anything else.
For me, when it comes to multiband compression, or not multiband, but parallel compression, I always have to think, what does parallel compression do? And when I parallel compress something, it's like when I want to keep the transients of something, and then I want to bring sort of that softer, nuanced stuff up. And if I hear that on a track, then I'll go for the parallel compression. I'll do the parallel compression that way. Otherwise, I'll just go for the straight one. But I always listen for, do I want to bring this, is the soft stuff, the nuances getting lost? And that's the stuff that parallel compression is really good at. So it keeps the transients, but also brings the nuances up. And so that's the case when I would actually use parallel compression. Otherwise, I use 90% of the time I'll use standard compression. It just depends on what it is. I do a lot of regular acoustic recording mixing, so I might put it on like a acoustic guitar or something. That might be like the like a finger picked acoustic guitar to bring the nuances up, but keep the articulation in there. So just that's what I listen for in a sound. And the OTT sounds, it's a thing. But I don't know. It makes me wince a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to do that, and sometimes I'll do it different ways just because I want to do it a different way one day. I mean, there's, the easiest way, the glue compressor has a wet dry built in, so that's kind of one way doing it. The other way is like duplicating a chain in an instrument rack or an effects rack. You could do it that way within the track, or you could do a traditional where you pop a compressor and a return track and use send and bus compression that way. So sometimes just doing it a different way and seeing it laid out on the screen will cause me to use different compressors or on different things.
One of the actually cool things I've done was, as far as drum sounds with parallel compression, is taking the whole drum mix except for the kick drum, because the kick drum will throw off a compressor. But especially if like a big beefy kick, you'll hearing the sucking sound of the compression. But if you take all the drum tracks, even the reverb sometimes, and parallel compress the heck out of that, and just maybe dial it down to like 25-30% wet, you can get a really cool like in your face drum sound, and then have the kick drum separate out of that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Any more questions?
Hi, I'm Vander. Have you guys messed with any machine learning or AI in Ableton?
Can you say that one more time?
Machine learning or AI in Ableton.
And what about it?
Have you messed around with any of it, like Google's Magenta project?
I have not, but I know somebody who is doing their PhD on it right now.
Sweet. I need to probably make myself a candidate too.
Yeah, I'll connect you guys because he's doing some really cool stuff with it, and he knows a lot more about it. I just know that he's been saying some really cool stuff. I haven't really had a chance to check it out yet, though.
Have you guys heard of Orb Composer? It's a project that lets you have like a whole ensemble of MIDI actors, and then the MIDI actors kind of talk to each other and create a composition. I think it's developed in Europe, but I don't know too much about it. But it lets me do like a 32 arrangement piece in Ableton, and it sends MIDI in, and they have a template for me that kind of helps me arrange all of it.
Yeah, I think the idea of it is interesting in the same way that I think about like generative music, where you have these like chances and probabilities that are still controlled within like certain parameters. That idea of like kind of giving me unexpected things, or just like playing with a drummer. Like I don't know what the drummer's gonna play, or I don't know what this person's gonna do, and it's gonna cause me to react. So in that sense, like the Magenta is really interesting. If it ever got to the point where like I just want to press a button and make a track automatic, like that's not as exciting, because part of like the joy of making music is like playing an instrument and struggling to learn it, because making music is hard, but it's very rewarding. So I think using it like that is really interesting.
You guys ever played around any AI?
No, I saw the Google thing, the Google Magenta. So I think another Ableton user brought that up, and I was like, this is really cool. I'm going to need some time to dive into this. So I like bookmarked it on my computer, and maybe during spring break I'll dive in and check it out, because it seemed really interesting and some cool stuff, but I don't know anything about it.
I would encourage everyone to check it out. It's finally at a point where it's drag and drop. It's all Max for Live devices. Just download it. I think it's on GitHub. The earlier edition, though, really had this sense of being with an AI player. So you would play to it, it would think for a second, and then I swear it wouldn't stop. And that was very cool. It felt like genuinely alive. Whereas like this new plugin is pretty much like drag a MIDI clip, it analyzes it, and it spits back a MIDI clip, which is super helpful. But it's not like this live player, which is kind of what I'm seeking. Okay, another question. What about modular synthesis in Ableton? And do you use any external hardware or integrate modular synthesis in recording?
I do not own any modular synthesis because I can't afford it, but I'm constantly watching videos on YouTube about it and dreaming of the day when I can have some modular synthesis. I was actually watching some videos last night about some modular setups. But in order to kind of like scratch that itch, I've been using a program called VCV Rack, which is a free application you can download, and it's basically like a modular emulator. And you're just gonna like drag and drop different modules in there, and you can connect them together using these little digital cables. And you can basically run it like a third-party plugin. So you can run the audio out of that directly into live, and so you can use both at the same time. So you could like generate a patch in that and then record into live.
Great. VCV Rack?
Yep. And it's free, and then they have some like modules you can buy for like $20 a module or something like that, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know some people that use. Do you use modular?
I just got the Teenage Engineering 400 modular.
There's a suite of plugins made by Expert Sleepers that are control sources for modular.
Yeah, sweet.
The Max for Live devices.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
A lot of people are using those as well. And I just heard that there's a link. You know about Ableton Link?
Yeah.
Someone created a Link module.
Yeah, I saw that, the Ableton Link Pi device, like a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like $180. I think he's selling it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, so definitely keep your eye on that space. There's going to be, I imagine, more things like that, kind of allowing it to be easier to bridge the modular in World and Live.
Yeah.
And, one, real expert in that is Darwin Gross, who is involved, with Cycling 74 and a lot of this. He used to be around here, and now he's Minnesota, yeah. But you look him up online, Darwin Gross, and he knows about Ableton and he knows about modular. So
sweet,
he'll lead you down the right path.
He
but you should also go to that, like we were saying, Rocky Mountain Synth Meetup meets once a month. they're kind of various places.
Yeah, they move around a little bit.
But I think they've been made live, and but you should go check that out because that's not just Ableton. They do anything synthesis and a lot of cool stuff with modular with them.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Just one other thing I wanted to mention is inside of Max for Live, if you open up like one of the patcher windows, there's a whole little section in there on the left-hand side called beeps, and they are pre-built modules, and they run on the same CV setup, and you can build a full modular synthesizer inside the stuff that comes with Ableton Suite and Max for Live. So you don't even need VCV Rack or any of that other stuff. I will say VCV Rack though definitely gives you much more the feel of sitting in front of a modular synthesizer. The Max for Live patcher window obviously kind of has its own host of drawbacks or whatever with, it looks very technical. So, but yeah, it's another free option. So.
Yeah, I love Beep. And if you have Live Suite, you already own Beep, which is part of Max for Live.
Yeah.
It's a great way to learn modular.
Beeps. Yeah.
BEAP, right?
Yeah.
We probably got time for a couple more questions. Anybody else got anything they want to ask us? Some over here.
Do you guys ever use an oscilloscope? An oscilloscope. It's an electrical voltage meter.
I use one a lot when I'm doing especially FM synthesis, like using the operator just to kind of see what the waveforms look like.
Yeah.
I've got a free Max for Live one that I found on maxforlive.com, and it gets the job done.
Sweet.
Yeah, they're great for like checking the phase and phase relationship with stuff a standard oscilloscope does. But I like other meters like the Insight meter from Isotope's great. That comes with ozone and stuff. That has all of them on there. So it'll have an oscilloscope, and it'll have a spectrograph, and it'll have an LUFS thing, and you can customize it however you want.
All right. So this one's about like live performance and stuff. I'm like getting to the point where I have all this music that I've been making for years, and I want to start playing live shows, and I'm trying to mix like DJing out the electronic stuff with like live guitar and different instruments, and I'm wondering just like what is like one thing you wished you knew at first when you were starting live shows, or like how to actually do all that, because it's really intimidating for some reason, and I'm kind of just blown away by all of it. So that's a pretty open-ended question, but I don't know.
Darren, you've got a pretty intricate live setup.
I do.
What did I wish I would know? Less is more. I guess get it into session view. There's several ways to do that, from arrangement, if that's where you are. If not, as simple as this sounds, it really helps when you save as. You can always go back. It's just sitting there. Just make a new save as and then start deleting stuff. Or combining it, less scenes. Like sometimes I might have 13, 15 scenes for one song because I thought I'd maybe want to hang out on that level, like that bridge section or something. And then it's like, no, it's an 8-bar thing and that's enough. And then I want to get back to this other thing. So I've like condensed things into maybe 3 scenes. You know what I mean? Instead of an 8-bar verse, 8-bar chorus, 8-bar bridge, a solo section, and an ending section, I'm going, am I really going to hang out on that verse? Probably not. The verse is 8 bars, right? And I'm coming from something even a little more esoteric, like jazz mania. But going, you know what? No, 8 bars is pretty cool, and it's going to go right into the chorus. Maybe the chorus is where I'm going to loop it. So just having less stuff, like you're actually opening up your live set and you're going, here's my 12 songs I'm going to play on this set or this show, and each song only has 3 or 4 scenes. That's a little more, just visually, it helps. So kind of limiting yourself to start out with, and then go, no, man, I feel like kind of contrived. I wanted to play because I want to play. So I want to do this other section of have it be open, and then you can always expand it, but maybe start small. But if you have questions about how to kind of set it up in your session, I mean, I know my way. That's just one choice, right? But there's different people. There's a lot of cool videos on Ableton.com of people talk. That one they just brought up, right? From the yes,
Big beats.
That's like some detailed. It's really always cool, even if you're never going to do something like that. You learn a lot of things, man. People's minds are awesome, so they're like going, I wanted it to be this way, so it would work for me, you know. So I'm playing live trombone, keyboards. I have a vocoder, headset mic, and then I can loop any of those things at once. So I have a push, my laptop, and an iPad.
How do you actually, I probably should know this, but how do you arm multiple different instruments to be playing through Ableton at once? Can you, have like multiple instruments recording, or?
I have it mostly on monitor in.
Okay.
So those are MIDI, and they're just, I can play them at any time, and then I'm turning on and off the track. I'm actually muting the track or a device. And a lot of times, actually, I take that back. I'm more actually muting the device. So it means when it's off, it's not taking any CPU, because I'm using plugins too, Guitar Rig and Omnisphere, and so I like that I'm not using it, it's off. And so then I'm going to go to use it, and then I know that it's going to suck up a little bit of juice, but then it's worth it. But so, yeah. And the beauty is get started, try to get through. I like Zach's thing too. Like, just get through a tune. Don't get too bogged down in a thing, and try to go from start to finish and go, how was that flow? What do I need? And then assess it, make some tweaks, and then try it again, you know. But it's slow going. But you should know, you could have 400, 600 scenes in one set. Just keep going deeper, and I have that. But I'm working on my show now, and I've been going, you don't have to have all these answers. You don't get to do 10 things. You just know, after this thing, I'm doing this thing, right? And be real dialed in.
I feel like the two best pieces of advice I can give you are number one, if you make mistakes, nobody cares. In the audience, people are not paying that close attention, and you'll notice when you make a mistake, and then you'll like get stressed out about it. But if you just keep playing, if the music stops for a second, and as long as the music starts again, people are happy. They're like, just do you and have a good time up there, and that's what people will connect with, and don't stress out about the little things. And then also just think about like what's going to make you engaged as a performer? What are you excited about doing on stage? Do you like playing guitar? Well, then you should have a set that involves you playing guitar and occasionally doing other things. Don't try to be a one-man band, which is kind of what Darren does a little bit, where he's mixing and he's doing effects and he's launching things and he's playing different instruments simultaneously. At some point, you can maybe get there, but as Derek was saying, less is more. Or as I like to say, do less better. Do one thing really well as opposed to trying to like launch clips and do effects and mix and play an instrument at the same time. Just focus on one at a time.
Yeah, because I think there's this thing where I kind of like, well, I don't want to be playing with a play-along track. That's so lame. But no, it's not. It sounds freaking awesome. It's like really hitting hard, and then I'm playing trombone over it. That's enough. Because what is a normal DJ doing? He's playing the track and not playing a damn thing. So I'm doing something extra on top of it. That should be enough. But then I beat myself up and then think, well, then maybe I should put this and that, and go, no, what do I do on a gig? You go and see a gig. It's a 4-piece band. They don't even play any other instruments. They're playing 4 instruments for an hour and a half. That's enough, because it's about the music, right? What is the musical content? What are the lyrics happening? What's the melody? So I think that's right. Just start that. Do a play-along. Think of it as play-along vibe, and then I'm playing guitar. And it seems like it needs something else. Well, maybe you can just mix that in and have it be part of the track, not something you have to trigger. Less triggering, that adds a lot of stress. I've lived through it. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, automation. Let the computer do let the computer do things that you don't want to do. Yeah. And you can automate everything inside of Live. So you can automate effects, you can automate clip launches, you can automate literally anything. And so hit one button and have it do a sequence of events, and that way you don't have to hit the button 5 different times.
Zach touched on one thing I was going to say, which was think about like what kind of experience you want to have yourself as a performer. Do you have a background as instrumentalist? Like, can you play guitar or synthesizers or push or a drum pad or sing or rap? And then do you want to involve that into your live show? So that's like, what do you physically want to do? And also, like, what experience do you want to have for your audience? You know, like, is just playing, this is assuming that you have music that's already been written somehow. Is it okay for your audience just to hear your finished track in the original arrangement from beginning to end? That might be totally fine. Then the second part is figure out how big of a safety net you want. So if you're a one-man band, you have a very small safety net, versus if you have a more of a DJ style set, you have a bigger safety net, because a lot of the sounds and instruments that people are going to hear are already there and be performed. And then if you do have that DJ style set, don't have any qualms about that not being a real performance, because I think of in some ways, kind of like the oldest cover band in the world is the symphony orchestra. You know, they're playing music that was already recorded and written, and they're performing it back in a single way every single time. But there's all these series of moves that they've rehearsed and practiced to get it to be performed at a high level. Same thing with the DJ. Like, you have different like transitions and moves that you practice and rehearse, and if you mess it up, it's going to be bad, and if you pull it off, the crowd's going to dig it. So just kind of figure out like what kind of vibe and what kind of style of performance you want to have.
Thanks.
We got one more question. Anybody got anything else they want to ask us?
All right, back on compressors real quick. What's your guys' opinion on hardware compressors? Do you guys use those at all, or do you just use VSTs or native?
I think the general attitude is if you have access to them, use the hardware. And if you don't, then the software is usually just trying to emulate the hardware in most cases anyway.
A cheap plug-in compressor is going to sound way better than a cheap hardware compressor. So if you have the money to get a good hardware compressor sound, you have to have a good hardware compressor, which is going to cost you at least $1,000. Yeah. So don't buy a $200 Alesis 3630. I remember I had a coworker like, I got Alesis 3630, and it sounds. I'm like, I remember those in college. Those sounded terrible. He I was excited about it for $200. And I was like, no, good luck. But I mean, now they're worth a lot of money because they have a great side chaining feature that a lot of electronic musicians like. But back in the day, they sounded terrible. So as far as bang for your buck goes, you get more out of a. I mean, just like anything, you get more value out of a software to a certain point until you get like a good $1,000 compressor. My favorite's like the Distressor, but I bought the Arouser, which is their current digital equivalent, and I use that on a lot of stuff. But I use standard stock compressors, the regular compressor in live a lot, all the time.
I don't use any compressors, and I don't have a desire to use any hardware compressors. But if you have like an admiration towards using hardware compressors and you know what they do and you want that certain result, I would say go for it. But if you have really good music, I think that's going to overshadow any gear that you use, like any plugin, any software, any hardware. And I think when Flume writes a really great song, I think a small detail like that is going to not do much.
I actually have one final question for you guys. As people who are just kind of involved in the music industry and just doing a lot of work with lots of different people at different skill levels, from students to professional musicians, what do you see as being on the horizon in music? Like, what are you excited about that's coming up that people don't necessarily know about, whether it's technology or genres or styles or anything going on cool?
What do you mean, what's on the horizon?
Just like anything cool that's going to be happening in the music industry that you think is exciting.
MIDI 2.0. I was going to say MIDI 2. That was the only one that came to mind.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
No. I don't know as much about it. I just remember reading it like, that seems cool. But they've been trying, MIDI spec came out in 1982, 83. So they've been trying to replace and enhance and change MIDI over, since then, was it 30 some odd years.
and unsuccessfully. So we'll see what happens with Mini 2. It seems there's a lot of good hardware manufacturers on board and software manufacturers on board, so we'll see.
I think just since I play trombone and I'm excited about effects and electric trombone and stuff, I'm aware of it, so maybe I'm more sensitive and notice it, but it seems like more of that is happening. There's just random coolness. So flutes, you know, French horn, like instruments that would be considered kind of off, then they kind of have this newfound place where they can be creative, you know, which I think is really cool. And it's all kind of because of the technology, you know. And really, I think Ableton's the easiest to deal with that and incorporate it into some sort of a sensible thing that you can use to start off the bat and say, hey, how can I get started with doing this? And I literally just taught a family who you Jeff, that you emailed me right before I came here. So man, wife, 2 young kids. And the young boy, I think he's only 8. And he was jumping on there and already double clicking and creating clips and created a drum beat and this and that. And I mean, that's exciting. I mean, so it is a new thing where 20 years ago, yeah, it didn't exist. So, I mean, in this way, right? So these young kids, I think there's going to be a whole wave of people that's like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. I can create this natural thing. Now let me deal with other concepts instead of like, how do you use this technology? It's pretty self-explanatory, especially the young crowd.
Yeah, I can't really talk about anything specifically that Ableton may or may not be working on, specifically Ableton related, but as far as kind of like trends or things that I'm excited about or I think are up and coming, one is learning. The accessibility to learn anything has just gotten easier and easier and easier every year. So anything that you want to learn, you can learn from amazing, intelligent people all over the world. So that's really exciting as people have more access to knowledge. Also, I think people that were, previously more disadvantaged have the ability to make digital music both on the web and through devices. So accessibility to music making devices is also increased, and that's going to bring in a whole new generation of music makers, which is also really exciting. Yeah, that's kind of where when I think of the future.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming in, you guys, and sharing all your knowledge and information with us. Thanks to you guys for showing up and providing us with a bunch of really awesome questions. As I said at the beginning, we do this every month, so keep an eye on the Boulder Ableton Live user group Facebook page for info about our next meeting. Do you guys have any cool events or anything coming up that you want to shout out to?
I have one. On Thursday here, we also are hosting the Subs Up meetup. It's another monthly music meetup that I help run with a couple of my friends. It's a little less kind of Ableton focused, similar to like the Rocky Mountain Synth group. We try to cater to a lot of people and just kind of general concepts and ideas. One of the really cool things that we do is everybody shows up with a 1-minute piece of music based on various different creative limitations. So the challenge for this month is you have to make 1 minute of music without ever listening to it. You have to mute the speakers or whatever and never actually listen to it. We've done past challenges where it was like, similar to the Pinecone thing, it was like make an entire 1-minute piece of music using a single thing, and I gave everybody a kick drum. And they had to make a whole song from a kick drum. We did a food Foley challenge for November because it was Thanksgiving. We gave a bunch of people weird, like gross food samples, and they had to make a song from it. So definitely come check it out on Thursday. You don't have to bring a challenge track because obviously that's kind of a last-minute thing. But we like having the conversation kind of keep going in between stuff, and that's why we do that. So that'll be Thursday, 7:30, probably in here because we'll have a class going on over there. Yeah, hope to see everybody there.
Yeah, it's a super cool meetup. You guys should definitely go check that out if you're interested in just, getting more involved in the local music producer community around here.
I got a song coming out tomorrow. Well, it's been about. If you watch the show The Rookie on ABC, there's a song called Quarantine that you'll hear on there. That's going to be playing the song that we worked on.
Cool.
Yeah. Flowbots.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for showing up. We'll be sticking around a little bit. If you guys have any more questions for us, just feel free to come up, and hopefully I'll see you guys next month. Darren, do you have a Denver user group coming up anytime soon?
Yeah, first Wednesday of the month is what we shoot for, so I think that's April 3rd. That's
check out the
right
Denver.
downtown, a couple blocks from Union Station. And really hip little facility there called Tech Hub, like a computer fix-it store. And it's always a lot of fun, too. So this is the Boulder one. That's the Denver one. You can come to both and get your fix.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Huge thanks to Zach and KMG. Give it up.
Very cool.
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
We also we live stream this, so if you want to hear the answers to our questions again, I think it'll be up on the KMG YouTube page. So I'll post that on the Facebook event page as well.